Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to cross the Øresund once again, and we're going to go back to Copenhagen in Denmark and revisit a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. So I've had some really nice beers from this brewery over the years, a good few different styles, but I think it is fair to say that this brewery are still best known for their different kinds of IPAs and also their big imperial stouts. And they were actually one of the first Danish breweries that I discovered when I moved over to Scandinavia back in 2015. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases. It caught my eye when I saw it on social media, and when I was over in Copenhagen the other day, it was one that I just really thought, I need to get one of these to review on the channel. But it's a style that I know these guys can do very, very well, so needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Amager in the south of Copenhagen, in the southern part of the city, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Amager Bryghus. So this particular beer is called Todd's Hammer. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and this one is a double IPA. Going from the ingredients list, I'm guessing that this one is going to be more of a West Coast double IPA, but we'll just need to see when we open it up. But this one, of course, is brewed in collaboration with Todd, who is involved with Surly Brewing Company, although strangely it's not listed as an official collaboration with Surly Brewing Company. They of course come from Minneapolis in Minnesota actually. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Amager Bryghus before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and you can of course go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on geography. The whole channel has a geography based tagging system, and you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries as well. You'll find this guy in the Danish playlist along with many other very nice beers. We do like our Danish beers here on Rampant Lion Reviews. But yeah, let's go on then and chat a little bit about Amager Bryghus then. On to my brewery notes. So, Amager Bryghus, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Kastrup in Amager, in the southern part of Copenhagen on Sjælland, the easternmost of the main Danish islands. And the company was it's one of the best known Danish craft breweries, I think, outside of the likes of Totul and Mikkeller. But the company was established back in April of 2007 by two friends, and this is Morten Valentin Lundsbach and Jakob Storm, and both of these guys were avid homebrewers for a number of years. But apparently when they were together in school, they were forced to do a chemistry and physics project, and so they wrote about the fermentation process that went on in beer, and that was them hooked from a very early age. But both gained their brewing diplomas from the Scandinavian Brewing School, which is part of Copenhagen University. They got those back in 2008, and since then Amager Bryghus has of course gone on to become very highly decorated. But the first brewery that they had was located in Tornby, which is in the southern part of the city as well, and they've just been constantly expanding their capacity over the last few years. So they had to buy a whole new brew kit in 2011, and this took their capacity up to around 250,000 litres of beer per year, but they did actually manage to expand their capacity to 400,000 litres per year in that first facility that they had. But they moved to a new site closer to the airport in 2018, and this doubled their capacity, so I think they're now actually brewing in the region of 1 million litres of beer per year. And they also opened up their tap house bar in Copenhagen next to Nørreport station in March of 2019, and it was very soon after that actually they got another bar in Amager which is called Bryggen. And as I say, over the last few years, they've continued to pump out new beers and experiment with new recipes and so on. And as of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 345 different kinds of beer. Like I said earlier, these guys I would say are best known for their different kinds of IPAs. Back in the day, they were awesome when it came to the West Coast IPAs, and they're actually rebrewing, pardon me, a number of their older beers at the moment, which is quite interesting. But of course, they're very well versed when it comes to the big imperial stouts and some of the big malty stuff as well, actually. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about these guys. Probably some of my favourite beers from them, Herr Fredriksson. is a classic. That is a Danish classic, that beer, in my opinion. That's one that you really need to try. The Big Imperial Stout. You know, Batch 1000 was always a favourite of mine too. That was one of the best West Coast IPAs in the world at the time when that first came out. Bastard Princess, the very first New England IPA that they did, was also very, very good too. So yeah, those are some of the beers you should check out at the moment. Because it's winter, they've got the Winter in Bangalore IPA, which I always enjoy too, and a number of the Christmas beers are good. Reindeer Fuel is a bit of a monster, I have to say. But yeah, check out some of those beers. Again, if you want to learn more about Amager Bryghus, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on their usual social media, and of course you can check out the Untappd page to learn more about the beers, or check out some of my older reviews. But yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So, this one, as we said earlier, is an 8.5% double IPA. You can see the artwork on it is beautiful. The artwork, what's the guy's name again? I always, it usually says on the can. I don't see it on this one. I forget, but yeah, they have a house artist, if you like. But, oh no, here it is here. Simon Hartvig Dalgard, yeah. So I should remember his name after all the beers. I love his artwork. His style of artwork is just lovely. But there you can see Amager Bryghus. Down there, they've kind of modernised their symbols in recent times. You can see plain black top on the can. It's 440 millilitres. I think I paid 50 Danish kroner for this one. So that's somewhere in the region of like 70 Swedish. So €7. About £6.50 sterling maybe, and somewhere in the region of like $8 American. So for an 8.5% double IPA, not bad at all, I have to say. I bought this one at Mini, which is a big supermarket. I bought it in the Amager area because there's one of the menu supermarkets there in the north of Amager that gets pretty much everything from these guys. So you want your Amager beers, that's where you go. But the little blurb on the side here, you always get interesting ones. So it says, beer has been something more to us than just fizzy alcohol. It has given us each other, co-workers that turned into best friends, our partners in evil. International collaborations that have become lifetime partnerships. We've been lucky to witness a craft beer world where competition existed, but was always friendly, rooted in creating the best craft beer elixir that the beer nerds have ever tasted, until one of our friends created the next amazing beer. The world changes for the better, for worse, but memories and friendships remain. We dedicate this beer to two of our friends gone too soon. The current craft beer world would be completely different without their contributions to our community. Barnaby Struve, from Stig Bjerretz, was involved here. But Barnaby Struve, brewer and goodwill ambassador, you never stopped introducing us to your good friends, making our world larger and smaller simultaneously. And Jonathan Cutler, your pursuit of perfection is remembered. Also, I think you were the reason Urban Dictionary was created. Do I think we experienced the golden age of craft beer? Yes, I do, and forever grateful. Hopefully that there are more golden ages to come. Community and friendship is everything over an amazing beer, of course. Todd and Linda Haug. This beer is made in collaboration with Todd Haug of Chicago, Illinois, USA. But yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure he was the one that was involved with Surly Brewing Company from Minneapolis in Minnesota. But yeah, that's nice. I didn't know that Barnaby Struve had died, and of course he was involved in Stig Bjerretz here in Sweden. So yeah, a bit sad to hear that actually. I don't think he was even that old. So yeah. Anyway, but there you are, the Todd's Hammer. So the hop bill in this one, or the malt base first off, we've got low colour Maris Otter, low colour Golden Promise, and some dextrose. And the hops in this one are Columbus, Incognito, Sabro, Spectrum Citra, Spectrum Eclipse. So yeah, it should be quite interesting. I actually took some notes on Eclipse because we've only encountered this hop once or twice on the channel. So Eclipse is a new Australian hop, 16% alpha acid, and it's bred from a mix of Australian and American hops. It was actually released back in 2004, but as I say, I've not seen it that often, and it's known for its orange and piney character. So yeah, should be right up my street. But of course, Columbus we know quite well, about 12% alpha acid. That's going to give you that big sort of spicy floral aromatic bitterness. Sabro, again, American, about 14% alpha acid. It gives you that kind of very bright mandarin note with a bit of coconut underneath. And Citra we know very well, 14% alpha acid, you know, big oily mango, and in a West Coast IPA it's going to give you some of that kind of lemon limey and almost slightly gooseberry character as well. But as I said, 8.5% double IPA this one. Let's get it out into the glass and see what we have. I always get very excited when we review the Amager beers, and it's been a good while since I've had like an old school West Coast IPA from them, so I'm curious to see what this is gonna do. Should be pretty nice actually. So there we go. Let me just line up the can again so that it looks nice. So this does look very nice. You can see that this beer is poured with about a finger of, just under a finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head there. I'll let you guys just have a little look at that. You can see there's that nice cream coloured head there. It's definitely not perfect white. You can see there's a mix of kind of small bubbles and more medium sized ones toward the top. But yeah, the colour of this beer is absolutely lovely. So colour wise, I would describe this one as a very, very light amber. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrelation you do or adjuncts that you put in will also affect the colour of your beer too. But when it comes to when it comes to IPAs, you don't often have to care about those variables. But yeah, this one looks absolutely lovely, pretty much as you would expect from a kind of West Coast IPA, to be honest. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there at the bottom, but yeah, you can see a steady stream of small ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. A little bit of natural haze to it, of course, which you would expect from a West Coast IPA, especially I guess this one's not been filtered. So yeah, it looks very, very good and pretty much as you would expect for the West Coast IPA style, be it single, double or whatever. So yeah, very nice looking beer, this one. Let's have a little look at the aroma of this then and see how we get on. Nothing else we need to say about the appearance. The head has just faded away to be a thin kind of foamy layer. But let's go for it. Aroma time. Yeah. This is quite interesting. I mean, this is one of the more mild aromas, could we say, that I've had from Amager Bryghus. Let's try and sugar it up and see what we can get. Yeah, I mean, this aroma, we've had very complex aromas from Amager Bryghus in the past, but this one, it doesn't jump out of the glass so much. That's kind of interesting. Yeah. So for me, it's starting to come out a little bit now, but the first impression of this beer is it's quite a wet, strikes me as being, quite a wet, oily West Coast IPA in a way. But, as I say, quite subtle. You get the orange from this one, from the Eclipse and the Sabro right away. You do get that out of this beer. The malt base is kind of is quite subtle, as I say, and the green component isn't too pungent in this one, and that's quite interesting because back in the day, Amager Bryghus, of course, used a hell of a lot of early edition hops, and they used to use Tomahawk and things like this. The CTZ mix, I think they used as well. They used to use these, and you had this big green component that would jump out of the glass at you, and it was it was just lovely. But this one, it's kind of interesting, because the green component for me takes a bit of time to come out. This is a beer that needs a little bit of time to air, perhaps. I don't know. So yeah, the more that I smell it, the sweeter it gets, the more orangey it gets, and it gets a wee bit more. You do get a little bit more green character out of it. But as I say, first impression of it is that it is quite a subtle beer in some ways. So let's try and break it down and just describe the aroma a wee bit more in depth. So, as I say, backbone of this beer, you've got a little bit of that kind of fresh white bread crust that is sitting there. On top of that, there's some nice white bread to it. You do have some of that nice kind of straight up white bread. So yeah, a little bit of bread crust, maybe a teeny little hint of a very slightly woody aroma for me, but that's very, very minimal. Fresh white bread crust, white bread for sure. And then above that, you start to smell you do start to get a little bit of brown sugar out of this one. So there's a wee touch of a kind of caramel in the middle of the nose. So yeah, a little touch of oily caramel. Also a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit sort of thing as well. So a little bit of an oily caramel. As I say, is there a wee tiny bit of like Werther's Original butter candy sort of thing maybe? I don't know. But yeah, with this one, the more that I smell of it, I'm actually starting to get a wee bit more of a kind of brown wholemealy bread sort of thing. And I think that'll be from the Maris Otter. What was the other malt that was in this one again? That's got Golden Promise. So that'll make a bit of sense with the level of biscuity notes we're getting out of this one, and maybe the kind of slightly butter candy, butterscotchy thing. That's obviously Golden Promise is quite a popular malt when it comes to New England IPAs, at least here in Sweden it is. But this one, as I say, there's a bit of straight up caramel there. You do get a wee bit of that more kind of Werther's Original butter candy sort of thing too, and there's also some McVitie's Digestive Biscuits, and the more that I smell of it, the more I get a slightly kind of wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing to it as well. So the malt base is quite interesting. As I've always said, for me when it comes to West Coast IPAs, there's two ways these beers can go. They can be more biscuity, such as the Russian River Pliny the Elder, name nearly lost the name there, or they can be a bit more oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. So that's something to keep in mind with the West Coast. For me, those beers can lean two ways. This one, I think, is going to be a little bit more like the kind of Pliny the Elder type IPA. You can kind of tell that from the colour, because if it was going to be more caramel, it would be a lot more kind of amber and maybe slightly mahogany in its colour, to be honest with you. And it's interesting that, because at 8.5%, yeah, you know, you have to get the balance. If you're going for the more biscuity type, you have to get the balance on the malt base right. But, you know, Amar, yeah, they'll do it. They will do it. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of the beer. On the hoppy side of things then, you've got a nice little bit, there is a nice little touch of earthiness in there, but then you can smell that slightly spicy, floral, aromatic note coming out of the beer, and you've also got the nice grassy notes at the front of the nose as well. Just the impression I have of this one, I think this beer doesn't have, I don't think it's going to be that bitter, but we'll need to see. But remember, there's three kinds of hopping when it comes to IPAs. You've got early edition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil, gives you pretty much all your bitterness. Late edition hopping, last half hour of the wort boil, little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma, and then dry hopping, pretty much all flavour and aroma. West Coast IPAs tend to use all three, and back in the day when they were high in bitterness, you know, the early edition hopping was very important. New England IPAs tend to rely on the latter two. I would say late edition and dry hopping, but usually you can tell because the green component will be very deep and, you know, dank and things like that. I don't find this one overly deep and overly dank, which is, yeah, you can smell there's a little bit of that in there, and definitely a bit of that kind of Columbus spiciness. So yeah, I like how this goes together in that sense. But yeah, green component's interesting. On the fruity side of things, it is pretty much what you would expect. I get some nice kind of, I get a little touch of passion fruit to it, a big oily mango for sure. I don't know about pineapple, maybe a little bit of a pineapple and a wee touch of apricot in there. That's the kind of complexities of the Citra, of course. But you also have that nice, you also have that nice kind of, you also have that big orangey component to this one, which is both the Eclipse and also the Sabro in this one. I don't get so much of the kind of, I get a tiny little bit of the kind of coconutty type thing from Sabro, but not overly much, as I say. But yeah, big orangey notes in there from both the Sabro and the Eclipse. And then there's a wee touch of a kind of lemony limey note, which I guess will be coming from the Citra. Citra always shows you a bit more of that kind of lemon limey and almost slightly gooseberry type note as well when you put it in West Coast IPAs. It's more about the mango, and a big juicy mango when it's in a New England, of course. Different hops behave differently in different beers and, you know, with different malts and yeasts and stuff. You have to always remember that. But yeah, lovely smelling beer, this one, I have to say. It takes a bit of time for it to come out though, but let's put the rest of this into the glass and we'll have a taste and see what we have here. Very curious about this beer since I saw it on Amager Bryghus' Facebook. Very good. So let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. This one is the Todd's Hammer, 8.5%, I think West Coast IPA from Amager Bryghus in Kastrup in Copenhagen. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that is pretty damn solid, I have to say. Now, one of my favourite beers that Amager Bryghus did back in the day was it Arctic Sunstone, it was called. And that was like an orangey leaning pale ale. I think it had a load of Amarillo or something like that in it. Beautiful beer. This one kind of reminds me of that in some ways. But the thing is as well, it's remarkable. This beer is remarkably easy to drink for an 8.5% West Coast double. It's actually very just It's very smooth, but at the same time, it's just quite light and kind of easy going. It's a dangerous beer, this one. I think you will find this beer is quite dangerous. But yeah, first impression of it is really nice, smooth, malty character. Got a good little bit of orangey, fruity note to it as well. And then, yeah, you've got, you do have some really nice green component to it as well. It's a solid beer, this one. I would say that this one strikes me as one of the more modern takes on the West Coast IPA. It's definitely not. It's not so old school. This one. It doesn't have such a big bitterness and things to it. And we are drinking this one pretty fresh. This has only been in the can about. I think it was canned about a month ago actually. So yeah, we are drinking this beer fairly fresh. We do have to say that. So this is more of a kind of modern take on the West Coast IPA. Definitely not one of the big bitter 80 IBU beasts that we used to drink back when I first encountered Amager Bryghus. So yeah, more of a modern take on the West Coast IPA, definitely. But yeah, I mean, flavour profile wise, this one is pretty nice. And it's interesting too, there's only two or three. They've only got a bit of Golden Promise and a bit of Maris Otter in this one, along with some dextrose. And Amager Bryghus used to put quite a few malts in their beers. They used to have quite a huge list of malts and things in them. But they've gone for a more kind of simple approach with this beer, and it works. It really does work. Just kind of goes to show you how diverse beer can actually be. But like I say, this is a really nice, very solid West Coast double for me. Certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this again. Can it topple batch 1000 for me? I don't think so. Winter in Bangalore, I don't think either. But yeah, the flavour profile of this beer is pretty damn nice actually, so gets a thumbs up for me. Let's break this down and just describe it a wee bit more in depth. So, middle of the palate with this beer then, middle third of the palate. You can feel the backbone of the beer. You do get a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust, absolutely. There's a little bit of that kind of sitting there in the middle of the palate. It takes a wee bit of time to come out though, and it is actually very smooth in fairness. Above that, you do get you get a kind of, a little layer of a kind of wholemeal brown bready sort of thing, so absolutely getting some of that. Above that, you've got a white bready layer, and like I was picking up in the aroma, there is a little bit of woodiness. There's a tiny little touch of woodiness there just before the border with the kind of front third of your palate actually. So I'm getting a little bit of that in there. So yeah, that's that is nice in that way. Yeah, the breadiness is very, very smooth in this one. And of course, I like Maris Otter's always an interesting malt. I always liked the bready character you get from Maris Otter, and it's maybe just because it was I think it was used quite a lot in Scotch ales actually. In some ways, quite a lot of breweries in Scotland like to use a little bit of Maris Otter. But above the kind of bready layers in this beer, you start to get the kind of brown sugary notes. So you've got a kind of circle in the middle of your palate with this beer that sits on top of the bready layer. And I will add that the white bready layer in this beer is really quite smooth. So yeah, in the dead centre of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of straight up caramel. But as you move further out from that, you start to get a more kind of Werther's Original butter candy type thing. And I think that's the Golden Promise that's giving you that. I've always found that you get a little bit of that from Golden Promise. So this is 8.5% as well. Like I say, it's dangerous to drinkable. The sweet bit of caramel is in there. Then you get the Werther's Original. As you move further out toward the edges of that middle third of your palate, it is more like a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah, I like how that goes together. Absolutely. So, yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So, yeah, middle third of the palate in this one is yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but it works. It really does work nicely. And the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, it does sweeten up and show you a little bit more of a kind of biscuitiness, and you start to get a little bit more of the Werther's Original, I think. But yeah, like I say, this is a really nicely done beer. So on the I think we've said everything we need about the middle third of the palate. Let's go to the back third of the palate then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there, a nice kind of brown bready sort of note actually. And the base, yeah, the base of that back third of your palate, you get a little bit of kind of breadiness in there. As I say, you get a little bit of the kind of bread crust, you know, it's a bit more grainy, remember, more bitter, grainy flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter ones come out further forward, so yeah, the bready character, the bread crust is definitely a bit more grainy. Above that, you've got the white bread, above that, you've got the kind of white bready notes in there, and you can feel that actually, you've got the layer of brown bread, the sort of wholemeally bready character is still there. It's a little bit taller, but not much more. Then above that, you've got the more white bready kind of character, which is, as I say, a little bit more light and airy in some ways. But then above that, you start to get the more yeasty qualities out of the beer. So a very airy and really light kind of white bread. And it's almost got a little bit of honeycomb character to it as well. So I do like how that goes together. Yeah. But yeah, back third of the palate, you've got that nice, you know, you get I think there's not really much else we need to say about that. The yeasty notes, as I say, a little bit of more airy white bread and a wee touch of kind of honeycomb quality to that as well. But like I say, you actually get a good bit of sweetness out of this beer the more that you drink of it. So yeah, back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller, and as I always say, when you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it condenses down and kind of squashes together a little bit. So on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you start to get a bit more of you start to get a bit more of that kind of spicy floral aromatic note from the Columbus. You can feel that Columbus is very distinct. I've had it many times before. It gives you that big spicy floral character, and you can feel that just gets more and more intense as you push further forward toward the front corners of your palate. So yeah, definitely some of that going on there. Then round the front curve of your tongue, you've got a nice little bit of a lighter grassy sort of thing going on. The grassiness actually has a wee bit of oily character to it. The green component in itself, I would say, is a little bit oily. But like I say, this beer is not going to blow the head off you in terms of bitterness. Definitely not. So yeah, the green component is quite nicely done in this one, and it's kind of in keeping with the whole vibe of the beer. But yeah, let's look at the front third of the palate and the sort of fruity parts too. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of bready build up in there. It's more of a kind of slightly sweet brown bready note there. Manna Softer, of course, showing its head again. But the base of the the base of that front third of your palate is kind of smooth white bread actually, and a wee just a very smooth white bread, and on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And this one again is really quite nice. So at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of the kind of there's a little touch of that strong grapefruit that you can get from Citra, and as you move forward it's a bit more passion fruity. Then you get the kind of oily mango, of course. The mango that you get from Citra is a lot more juicy in a New England IPA, and the West Coast it's a lot more kind of oily. But you definitely get some of that, and as you reach the middle of the palate, when you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, you know, I think there's a little touch of pineapple or something like that in there. Maybe a wee bit of, you know, dried apricot underneath. You do get a little bit of that. But as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's all about the orangey flavours. And you can feel there's a little bit of that kind of coconutty base, actually. You can get a little bit of that kind of coconutty base from the Sabro, but then above that you get the nice juice. You just get a nice juicy mix of oranges. It's a bit hard to place whether it's mandarin or it's more tangerine actually. I'd love to try a single hop Eclipse beer. I think I can't remember what beer it was that we had that had Eclipse in it, but it really Eclipse in that other beer, it really showed its piney characteristics. But yeah, the orangey mix in this beer is coming from the Sabro and the the Eclipse, and I would say that that gives you a really nice juiciness to the beer, and that's why I enjoy this one. I think is because it's got a nice bit of, you know, it's got a nice bit of biscuitiness to it, a nice bit of kind of a little bit of caramelly butter candy type thing, but it's also got a nice juicy orange. I'm a sucker for these kind of orangey leaning West Coast IPAs. But as I say, when you move further forward, you start to get a little touch of lime just behind the kind of front tip of the tongue. But yeah, very, very nice West Coast double IPA, this one for me, so gets a big thumbs up. I think we can round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. We've said everything we need to about the flavour profile of this beer, so let's look at that. So, mouthfeel wise, I would say that this beer is kind of it is mid-bodied. Carbonation is quite smooth in this one. Like I say, it's actually quite a wet beer. This one's got a bit of oiliness to it, but at the same time, it's kind of wet and smooth. IBU wise, I think this is maybe about 50-ish, something like that. It is, as I say, more a modern take on the West Coast IPA. I would love to see this one have a bit more bitterness to it. But I think this one is like 50, maybe 60 at the absolute most. I don't find this beer that bitter, but your palate is always changing. I've said about beers, you can feel the bitterness builds the further into the aftertaste, and IBU count is one of my weakest points of beer reviewing, so I'll say I don't find this one that bitter, then it'll, the guys will have brewed it to be like 70 or 80 and I'm just not getting it. But yeah, it does have a wee bit of a kind of creeping bitterness the further into the aftertaste you go, which is nice. So yeah, I think about this is like 50, 60 IBUs, something like that. But yeah, the malt base, as we said, is nice and smooth. You've got a good degree of sweetness to it as well. Then you've got a lovely oily orangey fruit character from this one. But really nice West Coast double IPA, this one, but definitely, as I say, one you would probably class it as a more modern take on the West Coast IPA. It's definitely one of these. So I've enjoyed this beer. I'm glad I got a hold of this one because it's an orange. I've not had an orangey leaning West Coast IPA in quite a wee while, and it's a style, as I say, that I do quite enjoy. But let's leave it there. Once again, big thumbs up to Amager Bryghus for this one. They've done a great job with it. But yeah, thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know your favourite beers are from Amager Bryghus as well. And do keep your Danish brewery and beer recommendations coming in. Slange, Scott, cheers. See you guys in another review very soon. This was the Todd's Hammer from Amager Bryghus in Kastrup, Amager, Copenhagen in Denmark. Cheers.